Oh, and I'm just gonna blatantly read from my notes. Okay, so I watched the latest James Somerton apology video. Now, the second he's done to see if he responded to my previous question from December's apology video. I had posted this question as a comment on that video, but as a result, he shadow banned me from his channel, so my comments are no longer visible to anyone but me and him. So let's go over the material facts of this real quick. He had two cameras that he was using, an Ursa Mini Pro G2 and a Pocket 6K, which are often visible in the backgrounds of his streams or explicitly featured in now deleted BTS videos. April 1st, 2023, he claims that the channel has suffered an income shock and will need to shut down if things don't turn around. This is presented weepily as an imminent threat that must be addressed immediately rather than a sober forecast for the coming months.
With the amount that came in this month, I don't know if we'll be able to continue with the channel. There's just not enough there to pay bills and for Nick and I. If the Patreon numbers stay like that, then we can't really. I don't think we can keep going.
May 4th, 2023, James tweets that he's playing around with a new camera. September 2023, Nick posts a behind-the-scenes video setting up for the queer sensibilities of Barbie, where the camera on the tripod is visibly a Sony FX6. Okay, why do I care? James Somerton is a fabulist. He has told so many provable lies that all of his claims are suspect, he has lost the benefit of the doubt, and any claim he provides without corroboration should be treated by default as a self-serving fabrication. He lies reflexively on a live stream. He just, off the dome, claimed that C.S. Lewis hated the Narnia books and only wrote them out of a contractual obligation. He just makes stuff up. This leads me to believe that he lied about the financial situation of the channel, and thus any money that he got from that was acquired under false pretenses. So, here is a number of my favorite lies from the second apology video, arranged as a numbered list. 1. The aspect ratio. For some reason, the entire video is squished horizontally. It looks weird, so I've gone ahead and de-squeezed it. 2. Death threats.
There was a misunderstanding between Jesse and I after that happened that I do want to clear up, where someone who at least claimed to be a fan of Jesse's, did an internet and threatened to kill me, which is, being a person on the internet, death threats are unfortunately not uncommon. At the time, though, I was in a very panicked state, and so I did report it to the police. I did not report Jesse to the police, which is the misunderstanding that people came away with. I did not report Jesse to the police. I would have no reason to do that. And it did end up that this person had a prior record with the police of violent acts, and they actually lived quite near me.
In an earlier version of this story, however, the threats he took to the police were not death threats, but were threats to falsely accuse him of sexual assault. So, theoretically, he received an email that said, "Hi, James Somerton. I am a huge Jesse Gender fan, and I'm going to accuse you of sexually assaulting me in order to ruin your career." No, that didn't happen. He has never produced examples of any of these threats, which is not a problem he has when emails actually exist, as we'll see later. He has never produced a police report or really any other meaningful documentation of this, and it's pretty obvious that he's iterating the story and escalating because it's not getting the desired results. He's lying. None of this happened. He never called the police. There are no emails, and if he produced any at this point, they would be immediately suspect as forgeries. 3. Early on, he thought crediting authors in the opening credits alone was enough.
Early on, I thought crediting authors in the opening credits alone was enough, especially since the videos weren't monetized early on. In some cases, I put their names in the opening credits, which I thought was fine. But like I said, I've spoken with some of these people now, and I understand why that was not okay.
As has already been exhaustively covered elsewhere, his earliest works of plagiarism had no crediting at all, so his version of events here in the video, the narrative of his plagiarism that he's telling, it's already skipping straight to the second phase of his plagiarism, which is the flimsy credit phase. So he's already making big leaps over stuff he did. 4, he got permission from Sean Griffin.
In some cases, I did get permission, like with the Evil Queens Disney video. I'll put the email up on the screen that I got from Sean Griffin, where he did give me permission to publish the video.
This is covered by Harry in the full video, so I won't go over it beat by beat, but Somerton once again reiterates his story where he reached out to Griffin to ask for permission, but in telling this story, he pulls out the email that he received from Griffin, and you can see from the date on the email that James puts in his apology video to attempt to exonerate himself is after the video was first published. He approached Griffin with an altered version of the video after he had been called out for plagiarism, and Griffin just let it slide. Number 5. Epilepsy.
The head injury is actually what led to me having epilepsy, which is why I can't work in any job that involves physical labor. Employers can't get insurance for me to lift things or operate vehicles and stuff like that. I actually did marketing for a restaurant group for a little while, but got let go when they found out that I was epileptic because, at least according to them, I couldn't be insured to be in the kitchens where I needed to be to film videos and take photos and stuff like that.
He claims that he was fired from a job working as a marketer for a restaurant group because he couldn't be insured to work in the kitchens because he has epilepsy. Okay, so epilepsy is not comorbid with being a plagiarist. So we got to work through some things to really get to why this anecdote is here in the first place. If this happened, which it didn't, it would amount to an outright admission from his employer that they were discriminating against him for medical reasons that did not pose an imminent risk to human life. Workplace insurance premiums are also based on the type of business, not the medical situation of the employees. The claim that someone told him they couldn't insure him would never happen because if they looked into insuring him, they would immediately discover that that's just not how it works. Between working at a Japanese grill in college and shooting marketing and training materials for a national restaurant group, I have thousands of hours of experience in working kitchens. I have done the exact job that James is describing here. Here's me on set in 2015. Since James has apparently never been on a film set, let me illustrate some things for him. Filming is a controlled environment. You're not actually shooting during a rush with real customers. You'd never be able to get the shots you need. It's all fake. It's performance for the camera. As a result of that, the vast majority of kitchen hazards are minimized because you're not doing 20 things at once and weaving between people trying to do a live job. The flow of the kitchen bends around the camera because it's performance for the camera. Even with the existing hazards, in a filming environment, James isn't the one personally working the deli slicer. He's holding a camera. There is no physical labor involved in this that isn't functionally par with what James does for YouTube. Humping C-stands 50 feet from the car is maybe it, I guess. So I fully believe that James got fired. That part tracks. He's lazy, flighty, cuts corners, is inattentive to details, and makes excuses for why he can't do anything. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt, which he does not deserve and has not earned. Even if this is 100% true, why is he telling this story? He's trying to explain why he needs YouTube specifically as a job, why he can't just find a different line of work now that he's proven he can't be trusted to do the work or tell the truth.
The head injury is actually what led to me having epilepsy, which is why I can't work in any job that involves physical labor.
Number 6, Dad can't read.
So Nick had to completely take over writing duties while I dealt with things you deal with after a person dies. My dad, you see, he can't read or write. He was very poor when he was a kid, so he had to leave school really young to work in order to feed his many brothers and sisters.
I don't even really know where to start. It's so fantastical. Like it's sitting on the edge of a thing that maybe could have happened in Canada in rural Nova Scotia in the 1950s, 1960s. But the details make no sense. His dad had to leave school, which means he was already going to school, because you can't leave school unless you were already going to school. His dad had to leave school really young in order to feed his many brothers and sisters. So here's my question. If you're going to school in the 1950s, 1960s, and you need to quit to get a job before you learn to read and write, which is kind of the first thing they teach you to do, especially in the 1950s, how old are you? What job did you get? When did this happen? So Canada began regulating child labor in the 1870s. Is James's dad over 150 years old? Like the implications of this story are that James's dad quit school to get a job when he was 7 to feed his many brothers and sisters who are presumably younger than him. Otherwise, they'd be getting jobs to feed him. What? It's a bizarre and needless elaboration. Like, okay, let me play more of it.
My dad, you see, he can't read or write. He was very poor when he was a kid, so he had to leave school really young to work in order to feed his many brothers and sisters. So I had to deal with all the legal stuff after my mom died, as well as making sure that all my dad's bills were paid and whatnot, especially after his income was basically cut in half.
You were in your mid-30s, James. This happened 2 years ago. You were a full-ass adult. You can just say you had to pick up the slack dealing with bureaucracy after your mother's death. You don't need a tragic backstory to explain why you specifically needed to handle this stuff. Why are you adding this bizarre, distracting detail? Number 7, brain damage.
This meant putting out more videos, which meant I had to take over more of the writing duties. This led to a lot of copy and pasting blocks of text into scripts. My intention at the time was to use these as a jumping off point once Nick and I sat down to edit the script, because that's what we would do. I would sort of put in my parts, Nick would put in his parts, and then we would sit down at a table, read through the whole script, and kind of try and make it seem cohesive. But I have memory issues because of a head injury from when I was a child. They're actually getting worse. When it came to editing the scripts, I couldn't remember what I'd written and what had been copy-pasted. We should have just chucked out everything that I had put into the script and filled them in with wholly original thoughts. Or I should have been taking notes on where things came from so that we could at least cite them in the videos, if nothing else. But I never did that.
This one's a big one, and I think it might be my favorite. This is either wholly fabricated or, at minimum, like many of these others, embellished to the point of falsehood. He says he's mentioned this before on streams and in videos, but I've checked with other people who have spent a ton of time researching Somerton's work, watching his stream archives, and according to them and my own research, this has never come up before. And I don't think James appreciates the magnitude of the implications behind this lie. He's not saying he missed some entries in a bibliography or some lower thirds or footnotes or lost track of a half-completed task. Let's synthesize this with something that he says earlier.
I can never really truly understand the life experiences of other far more put upon members of the queer community. This is one of the reasons that I would use their own words.
So he's saying that he would track down a source, often specifically looking for the life experiences of other queer people, read it, decide that it says something he wants his video to say, copy paste between 50 and 1,000 words into his work document, make no meaningful notes, no highlights, no indications in the moment, walk away, come back during the editing process, and be unable to distinguish what he personally had and hadn't written. He's implying an inability to recognize his own writing and trying to pass off vast swaths of plagiarism as something that just happened as an unintentional consequence of a tragic disability and an unfortunate lack of discipline. Okay, so if this were true, it would indicate a disability so severe that it would unavoidably impact every aspect of James's life. Like to the point that there would be no way that this would be the first time people would be hearing about it, especially given just the sheer amount that he used to stream with Nick, where he would just sit there and stare at chat, waiting for people to say things. This level of memory impairment would be life-defining. If this were true, if you were able to walk away from a document and come back and just look at it and be like, well, I don't remember writing literally any of this, so I must have written all of it, that would impact your life so dramatically. That would impact everything that you do. That would show up everywhere. Every time you went to the fridge, you would just be surprised at its contents. So, in theory, what he's saying here is that he has the foresight to seek the experiences of others. He knows that he copy-pastes large blocks of text into the work document, but if he walks away from writing for any period of time, then when he returns to it, he has no memory of any of it and cannot differentiate between what is his and what is someone else's. And, as evidenced by him telling the story, he apparently knows this about himself. So then within that, he has taken no steps to mitigate the problem, despite it apparently being the reason for multiple years of plagiarism for which he has been confronted multiple times. No, this is a lie. Most of all, though, if we dig into this whole lie, if we really, really dig into the purpose of it, this is just James is seeding the ground for the reason why the inevitable inconsistencies and vagaries of all his other lies are going to start cropping up the more he apologizes. He wants to come back as a video creator. He wants to be famous. He wants the praise and prestige and fans and money for a job that lets him sit at home and fantasize about A24 or Blumhouse just calling him up and dropping a movie deal in his lap. In order to do that, he needs to reduce the severity of what he's done, which will require lies. And those lies will generate inconsistencies. And so, memory issues for from a childhood head injury is, in his warped estimation, a suitable cover story for all of those inevitable contradictions. Bonus. He had to scrap The Listener because the story needed summer, but it was almost winter.
So I started working on a script for a movie called The Listener, about a true crime podcaster focused on the mysterious deaths of homeless gay men in his city. I was a fair way into the script when we realized it'd be about a year before we could even film anything, since winter was on its way and the story relied heavily on a summer setting.
Okay, so this isn't technically a lie, like in the sense that I can't prove that he didn't believe these things. What I can say is it is profoundly incompetent, as is just everything in the Telos section. In describing the comedy of errors that is Telos Pictures, James paints a picture of himself as an incompetent fool who was in way over his head and just kind of perpetually chasing a dream. He rejected the advice of others because he was just that convinced of his own personal magic. Okay, so he does this Indiegogo campaign where he initially asks for $3,000, a number that has been pretty widely derided. So I want to talk about that for a second. Is $3,000 enough to actually make a short film? No, but not a hard no. Okay, so if you are a filmmaker who is involved in filmmaking circles and your friends are filmmakers and their friends are filmmakers, then you call in every favor you've got. You get people to work for pizza because they like you or they're bored. You get a DP who has a bunch of credits as a camera assistant, but really wants to get an actual like director of photography credit under their belt. You get a professional DIT who just isn't doing anything else that weekend. And, you know, sure, you find a first AC who is between jobs and is willing to work for cheap just to keep active. If you pull a ton of favors and you only pay for the stuff that you can't sweet talk your way into, if you feed people and respect their time, you can make a short for $3,000. Tons of people have done it. Okay, so his Indiegogo doesn't get $3,000. It gets $87,000 Canadian. That is more than enough. In the context of Canadian independent film, $87,000 is enough to make the short film of your dreams. You can make many short films for that amount of money. In fact, that was the original plan. The Telos Indiegogo campaign stretch goals were make additional short films. James instead immediately scope crept to making a feature. Okay, so now he's making a feature. Is $87,000 Canadian enough to make a Canadian independent feature film? No. But not a hard no. Again, it's all the same things. If you have enough favors to pull, if you're really Spartan with your budget, you're efficient with your locations, you know what you're doing, you plan ahead, and you run a really tight ship. If you're that kind of filmmaker, you can make a Canadian independent feature film for $87,000. People have done it. Lots of people have done it. People have done it for less. So this is not, strictly speaking, utterly outside the realm of reality. And then the cancellations begin. First, obviously, Final Girl, the short film, gets canceled in order to instead make Final Girl the feature film. But then James realizes that he doesn't have the locations or whatever he envisioned for Final Girl, because that's all back in Halifax. And so Final Girl, the feature film, after being written, gets scrapped for Antisocial. He says they write Antisocial, haven't seen it, don't know if it exists, but then upon evaluation they realize that Antisocial is just, it's too big, it's got too much cast, it's got too many locations, there's no way for them to afford it on the budget that they have available. So Antisocial gets scrapped for The Listener.
Fair way into the script when we realized it'd be about a year before we could even film anything, since winter was on its way and the story relied heavily on a summer setting.
Editing Dan here, I just realized he said he was a fair way into the script, so the script wasn't even done. So keep that in mind as you listen to everything I'm about to say. Okay, so this is how you know that Telos was a spiritual fraud, if not a legal fraud. James was promising something that he was wholly incapable of delivering, to the point that he might as well have been promising a trip to the sun. So James has never made a feature. He's never even made a short film outside of a school environment. He has never personally organized a crew. He has never booked a production truck. He has never hired a honey wagon. Now, there are directors who can make magic happen with scraps, who can just will a trashy, low-budget feature into existence in 8 weeks. James is not one of them. James has never once demonstrated that he is that kind of director, because if he were, he would have just done it. He had the opportunity. He had 2 years of the opportunity, and he didn't, because he doesn't think that way. He's just not that kind of personality. And you know what? That's fine. I'm not that kind of filmmaker either. Most people aren't. So if you're not that kind of filmmaker, which you can tell if you're not, because if you are that kind of filmmaker, you're doing it. If you're not that kind of filmmaker, then in theory, having a draft of your script done at the start of winter for a script that requires shooting in the summer, that's kind of ideal, because now you've got 4 to 6 months to find a director of photography, find a first assistant director, make storyboards, do additional drafts of the script, secure props and costumes and scout locations, and figure out what you're going to need to pay for, what you're going to be able to get for free. That all takes time. How much time do you think that takes, James? How much time do you think it takes to make a movie? It takes, of course it was going to be a year before you could go to camera, because that's how long it takes to make a movie. In the realm of pure speculation, James was never capable of delivering on any of the promises about Telos, not because those promises were completely unrealistic, but because he personally was just simply unequipped to deliver them. Based on everything that I've learned from watching his stuff, from watching his behind the scenes, from seeing him as a filmmaker, from watching his communications on Twitter and the way that he talks about filmmaking, and from the material decisions that he made about how to handle Telos Pictures, James Somerton was never going to make anything, and he was in fact going to eternally find some new excuse for why things just weren't quite ready yet, because he was going to wait forever for things to be perfect. And that is not a perfectionist tendency, it is a procrastinator tendency. He doesn't want to make movies, he wants to be a filmmaker. He wants the prestige, he wants the attention, he wants the accolades, he does not want to do the work, he does not have stories to tell, he does not have a hunger for communicating with others or expressing something or just creating beautiful images. This is why he plagiarized. He wanted to be a YouTuber, but didn't want to actually do the work of being a YouTuber, so he took a shortcut. And there is absolutely no reason to believe that when it came to the much, much, much harder process of making films, he was suddenly just going to find the discipline inside him to focus on the task, not take shortcuts, not just try to wish it into existence. He has ambitions, but not drive or talent. And ambitions without actions or avenues to achieve them are called fantasies.